Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk. I am in for Peter Caldwell, who will be back next week, I hope. This is Drive, and unsurprisingly, the show dominated by the sentencing today of Axel Rudakubana, who has received a minimum term of 51 years. He was actually sentenced to 52 years, but of course he has served 100 plus days or so in custody. 51 years, what do you think about that? Is that enough? Unfortunately, the judge gave him as good as he could. He certainly maxed out those sentencing, or the sentence based on the sentencing guidelines available to him. Now we're going to talk, before we go to calls, by the way, to Richard Tice. Actually, we managed to get hold of Richard Tice MP, who is, of course, the Deputy Leader of Reform. Richard Tice will have a lot to say about this, I suspect, particularly, Richard, your reaction to the sentence itself.
I have to say I'm still in shock. I've never been so horrified by listening to anything to do with that sentencing. Was just mind-boggling, horrendous. And clearly the judge would have given whole of life if the monster had been just 9 days older. And look, 51 and a half years, I gather the breaking news that someone's applied for a review of that it's not long enough. And the judge made it clear he didn't expect Rudakubana to come out of prison. But, now is once we get over today, we've actually got to ask some serious questions. And, should we have whole of life for people under the age of 18? That's a question. We've got to review our contempt of court laws, as other countries do it slightly differently. France does it slightly differently. I called for the Home Secretary yesterday that we need to relook at that, because I think the public want more information. And also, given the details that came out from the judge, Russell, in terms of Rudakubana's interest in massacres, his interest in genocide.
Well, he became a scholar of death.
Yeah, but hear me out. If that's not terror, I don't know what is. The bloke had an Al-Qaeda training manual in his bedroom. If that's not political or ideological, I don't know what is.
Would it have made a difference to the sentence, though, Richard?
No, I don't think it would. But I think, look, we mourn the loss and the horror of what's gone on. But frankly, we now have to ask some searching, serious questions of people in positions of authority who have made appalling misjudgments. One of which is the Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson, at the Crown Prosecution Service, who clearly made the decision to instruct the police not to call this a terror incident. It was, anybody in their right, sane, sensible frame of mind would have determined that. I think Mr. Parkinson needs to consider his position. We're basically saying he should resign. No longer do I believe the CPS, under his leadership, has the confidence of the British people.
And Richard, why do you think he made that decision? Are you suggesting that there is a two-tier ethnicity angle here?
The only thing I can think of is political correctness. Something has changed in the authorities, because if you look back at numerous lone wolf incidents, such as the horrific killing of the MP Joe Cox in 2016 by Thomas Mayer, information came out within 24 hours about that individual, and it was judged a terror incident within 24 hours, as have many other
Parsons Green
hideous crimes that have taken place that have been much less horrific, still horrific, but less horrific than this monstrosity. So something has changed, and I just think, for our system to work, the British people have to have confidence in our police, and they've got to have confidence in our Crown Prosecution Service. And I think both are under threat, and there has to be some accountability. People need to know that when people make serious judgments and get it palpably wrong, as I think the CPS have done, then frankly, people need, resignations need to follow. Likewise, the people running Prevent, there should be multiple resignations. They clearly had so much information. Heaven knows what they were thinking. Seriously.
But Richard, you're talking about the CPS in terms of their decision to lay down certain charges, some of which were terrorist related, but they've been very clear that this was not terrorism. But
and that's the point. They made a judgment in the first 24 hours, apparently, to instruct the police that this was not terror-related.
Yes, and what you're suggesting is that the reason for that is because of political correctness. But I would go back further. Do we also think that the reason that this Axel Rudakubana ended up slipping through the net so many times, whether it be via Prevent or social services or the school, or the fact that he was known to have taken a knife into school 10 times, do you think there's an ethnicity angle there in terms of two-tier political correctness too?
Look, it's all related to political correctness, I think, and but fundamentally, all of us, it shouldn't be about ethnicity. It should be about the competence of the people making judgments when wrong uns, bad uns appear before them or are referred to them by concerned citizens. And what's the point of something like Prevent costing us fortunes if they're that negligent, that incompetent, that woeful, that frankly, they make such horrific judgments? Just think about this. If they had made the right judgment and that individual, that monster had been referred, frankly, to any sane person, he probably should have been sectioned.
Well, I said that earlier on. He should have been sectioned on the mental health case. Yeah.
In which case, those children would still be alive. Those children wouldn't be scarred for life, and all the horrors that flow from all of that. So, there have to be consequences to people's negligence and incompetence.
Well, and on the basis of it being a balanced and equitable justice system, that's not too much to ask for, is it? Regardless of colour, creed, race or whatever.
Of course, that should be completely irrelevant. But it does require competence, and there have to be consequences. Look, in a private business, if people had performed so woefully as those public servants, they would have been fired. No ifs, no buts. And the same sort of accountability needs to apply to public servants in serious positions of responsibility.
Yes, of course. And as a legislator, Richard, will you be doing anything tomorrow with regard to sentencing guidelines and seeking that they are amended and tweaked to take account of young killers that are under the age of 18, particularly? And I don't see how the Labour Party can disagree with it when they think that anyone over 16 by way of voting is an adult.
I think all of that has definitely got to be looked at. Why shouldn't a 16 or 17-year-old horrific, monstrous murderer not be given a whole of life? Frankly, I mean, you could say that down to any age, but I think that's one key point. I'm also very focused on this contempt of court point. We have to go back to where we were 10, 15 years ago, where information would be released about the alleged criminal, whether or not the individual was known to the authorities, and some form of reference to that. That doesn't prejudice a free and fair and proper just trial. And we have to, if we need to legislate to change that and have some form of instant disclosure that gives the public, I think, reasonable information, as recommended by the government's own independent terrorism czar, Jonathan Hall KC, these are the sort of things of confidence and the lessons that have got to be learned.
And have you ever known an instance in Parliament where you and your colleagues, you and Lee Anderson and Rupert Lowe in particular, were prevented from raising questions about this issue in Parliament, given that you have parliamentary privilege, given that I presume you could have been taken to, I don't know, a closed session committee room to ask those questions? Have you ever known anything like that? I know you haven't been a parliamentarian here for very long, but that seems to me to be very, very unusual indeed, that parliamentarians are gagged.
It's clearly very unusual, but we were told that it was sub judice. The Speaker made that very clear. The Speaker's decision ultimately in the House of Commons is always right, and he made that decision, and he'd obviously taken advice. So,
but you think it's unusual?
Well, it's clearly unusual, and mercifully so. But this was amongst the most horrific. I don't know how many instances before, and of course, no one wants to prejudice a fair trial. But if you get to the situation where confidence is collapsing in the CPS and the police, which I believe it is, then actually legislators, as I said to the Home Secretary, have got to say, we need to change something. We've got to be brave enough. What do other countries do to overcome this same issue? And I think some other countries do it slightly better. And I think we should say to ourselves, we've got to do better too.
Indeed. Richard, I know you're on the clock, so I'm going to let you go. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, thank you very much indeed.